Alrighty. Well, as all Hangouts go, they always start with an awkward 5 seconds while you say we're live.
We're
Hello,
live.
hello, Internet. Welcome to Subscriber Appreciation Day for October of 2017. Thank you guys all for sticking around with Step Back. And today I have been extremely fortunate to bring you probably one of my favorite YouTube channels going on right now, and real up-and-comer in the video essay community. So say hello to Contrapoints.
Hello. Thank you for having me here.
This is so exciting. Yeah, I'm a really big fan.
Thank you.
So for the probably maybe two people who are here who might not have heard of you before, can you give us a little bit of a laydown about what it is you do on your little Contrapoints?
So I am a full-time YouTuber now, my God. And I guess started about a year and a half ago, started about April 2016. I have a long history on YouTube very casually, but I started taking it seriously back early 2016. And my initial sort of goal as a channel was to sort of be the antithesis of anti-SJW YouTube, which I take it you are all familiar with, the many, many channels that we have devoted to how bad social justice warriors are. And that was sort of my initial goal, was to make the other case in a way that was sort of different than it had been done before. So my channel still talks about social justice issues, although I don't do the kind of typical feminist stuff so much anymore, as I do just sort of commentary on the alt-right has been probably for the last year the #1 topic that I cover. And then #2 would be gender and being transgender. So I'm also very recently begun my transition. So I talk about that on my channel as well. And kind of, as I would say, I do about, it's 50% video essay, 50%, I don't know, sketch comedy or something.
Yeah, that's probably the transition that, I mean, no pun intended, but the transition I saw on Contrapoints over the year. I think I've been following your channel pretty much about 6 months in. I think the first video I watched was the one, your immediate post-Trump video was the first one I found.
Yeah.
And ever since then, yeah, I've saw the channel evolve from a very funny video essay channel to really this sketch comedy. That was a good way to say it, a sketch narrative-driven almost thing. To the point where you have characters. I saw that on Twitter, that you have some people who are cosplaying as some of your characters for Halloween.
Yes, this has been a very great surprise to me, how many people are interested in dressing up as my Contrapoints YouTube characters for Halloween. I think it's really cool.
Hopefully not Fritz.
Yes, we've tried to discourage that. I mean, if people are going to a very woke Contrapoints meetup party, well, you can maybe put it on in the back room for a while. But I would not suggest, Fritz is my Nazi character, so I would not suggest walking out in an American city dressed as a fascist at this particular moment in history.
I have a friend who's doing a library information science PhD on trolling.
Oh, wow.
And he started in 2010, 2011, and he's one of those PhDs who's been around for he's year 8 or 9 by now. And
I know many such people.
And he started off as when trolls were the trickster jerks of the internet. And then he said that he realized, he said October of 2016, he was like, no, it's all real. Irony is dead.
It took them that long to realize that.
He was holding out for a long time. He was this person he's like, no, they're just all being ironic, okay?
Yeah.
It's just, they're all joking. They can't possibly be serious. And then he's like, oh, wait, no, they're serious. Okay.
I think for a lot of people, that moment happened in 2014 with Gamergate, when a lot of people kind of understood that the boundary between harmless fun and serious harassment had been crossed.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure how he was on Gamergate. I don't think I knew him back then, but
I mean, also this is a line that's always been crossed, actually. If you doesn't the phrase "an hero," the internet phrase, come from the harassment of these memorial page of a teenager who committed suicide. Like the 4chan, like there's some harmless fun, right? The Scientology protest and so on. There's also a lot of real cruelty and malice, right back from the very beginning.
Oh yeah, that yeah, he talks about it in a very interesting, difficult way. But I think he's like, one of the reasons he got locked up is because trolling became something very different from when he started to where he is now.
Certainly the way that it's discussed in media is very different. You know, it was originally just kind of like these, like, it was always discussed as something that would go on a YouTube comment section or something, right? Like just people simply saying preposterous, controversial things to get a rise out of you. And now it's become like, you know, this big like collective thing that has, I mean, I'd be interested to know what your friends, I take it the October 2016 revelation has it had to do with the fascist element.
Yeah, I suppose like we had it at arm's distance because we're north of the border. And so he was going on like he was being like an obvious goof Trump supporter. Like he was like he was doing the jokes, but not in public, but usually just with his friends. But he was like he was just like, oh wait, this isn't ironic anymore. And he like gave up. And yeah.
Interesting.
That was
so. Yes, the streamer Omni Destiny told me something similar, that he used to use like homophobic slurs in the kind of way that most boys used them on the playground in middle school or higher elementary school, and then noticed one day as he was using them that the people whose company he was in using these things really seemed to have the actual homophobic malice, and then stepped away from that.
And it seems to be happening a lot. This like, and I think this is part of what he's studying now, which is like this fine line between irony and not irony that's happening. Like, the other really cool example, or weird example anyway, is do you know the Warhammer 40K people?
Well, I just found out about this myself because the golden one, YouTube's greatest bodybuilding fascist, left a comment on my channel in which he called me a demonette of Slanesh. Not initially familiar with this reference, I had to look it up and find that it's from Warhammer 40K. And apparently, yes, this game attracts fascism for some reason.
Yeah, well, it started in the 80s actually as a criticism of fascism, because it's a society that basically followed fascism into a new dark age, but then it started to get less and less ironic over time, and it's kind of the longer term example of what we're talking about.
Interesting. I think someone else mentioned that to me, that the franchise had started out as like a dystopian or satire fascism or something, and then it's been interesting to watch how fascists can be. It's funny because we kind of think, I think traditionally, of fascists as being antithetical to irony, right? This is especially how like British comedians have tended to portray fascists, I know, as like being really pedantic. I think actually in Germany, this is kind of like the stereotype about Nazis, right? Pedantic, humorless. So the idea of a grinning Pepe Nazi, I think, was initially difficult to grasp. And it's been interesting to see how clever they can be at reappropriating even parodies of themselves and so on.
And yeah, it's so strange. And I guess like to go like super geeky or super old school on it, it's like, okay, so this is like this weird neo-romantic stuff, right? Like I'm trying to like place in intellectual trends, like Nazism kind of was like the end of this anti-intellectual, like anti-modernist thing that was like about feeling and about spirit of the nation and all sorts of weird stuff. And then we thought we killed it, but then I guess it's back in some weird way.
It seems to be. Yeah, romantic is a good way of putting it, because like even in like, I don't know if you follow the like I don't know if you follow fascist Tumblr, but like, well, one thing you see with that and with the golden one and a number of other fascists is there's a romantic nostalgia for some past Europe, which is usually this kind of like collage that they've made of ancient Rome and Celtic warriors and medieval cathedrals and Edwardian costumes, and like it's all together in this one idea of the great white pan-European culture that I mean, it's an invention, a concoction, right? But this is the kind of imagination that seems to ground their vision of what a society should be.
Yeah, with all of his, you just recently made a video on degeneracy, and
yeah,
I swear I've seen the Golden One dressed as a Spartan warrior.
Yes.
And I was just about to be like, there's a few things you might want to know about Sparta if you're going to go talking about the gay agenda and such.
Well, the whole thing, I mean, with his approach, the idea that he's the levels of homoeroticism on that channel and the Instagram are just off the walls. So the Spartan reference is really quite at home there. But yeah, it's.
I think even the Nazis tried to, like the OG Nazis, the 30s ones tried to use Sparta and.
Well, I was actually. I was when I was doing research for this video, I came across something I didn't mention in the video, but apparently one of the best-selling books in Germany during Nazi rule. Well, I wish I could remember the title of this, but it was a book of like photographs of nude men, like Aryan muscular men, like posing. And you know, this was approved by the propaganda minister and so on because it was taken to be a kind of celebration of the power and the beauty of the race. But you know, this is a very popular selling book of basically beautiful naked dudes flexing and posing. Like, so this is not necessarily a new addition to the fascist imagination.
That's a new one to me. I'm not exactly an expert on fascism.
I really must look this up. Like, I wish I had the title of the book.
Oh man,
I'm gonna Google right now Nazi book nude men, and I'm already on every list I could be on.
Oh gosh, yeah. If I can only imagine what Cesis's file on me looks like.
Oh, yep, I found it. It's.
All right. We do have one thing while you're like kind of looking it up.
Yes. It's called Humans in the Sun, Mensch und Sonne, a collection of nude photographs that includes lyrical praise of the male member, instructions for yoga-like exercises, and even naked skiing.
Okie dokie. That definitely sounds like I don't know. I feel like I can't. Because you don't want to psychoanalyze the past, so it's like hard to be like, what's going on here? But that's definitely not nothing, I guess I would say.
It's not homoerotic.
Yeah, and I mean there is something to play into, like how all of the most hardcore anti-gay right-wing people always end up with some sort of.
Yeah, the sheer frequency with which right-wing anti-gay politicians end up getting caught in affairs with gay prostitutes and so on is, I mean, I don't want to encourage the idea that homophobia is only the result of self-loathing homosexuality. I don't think it is at all. I think most of the time homophobes are heterosexual, but there's certainly the homophobic homosexuals are certainly a contingent that holds their own.
Yeah, it's complicated, and I mean, it's something worth exploring, but it'd be hard to do. So I have a question. So I have a follower, a subscriber named OnlyBro, whose only questions always come up being these extremely obscure political ideologies, and I imagine that these are fun ones for you. So one thing that came up is this: he wants to know about Nazbol.
I don't know anything about this.
All right.
Let's look it up real quick.
It's a short term for National Bolshevism, which is like a Russian nationalist communism. So it's like Nazi communist weirdness.
Yes, their logo is like a Nazi flag with a hammer and sickle in place of a swastika. Yeah, I've never heard of this before.
And it's supposed to be some sort of weird third way thing.
This doesn't sound like a good third way.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't really want the worst of tankies and Nazis.
Right, like, just what we need. Just what we need.
It'd be like, I'm just saying, like, you have your characters. It's like putting the cat ears on the cat stuff on your Fritz.
Putting the cat stuff on Fritz, yeah.
Oh God.
Just, yeah, great.
I wonder though if it's like if we want to unpack it a little bit. You know how like when communism kind of came to East Asia, right? They had this this kind of nationalist communism.
Yes.
The Juche concept and that's sort of the thing that was prevalent in a lot of those countries. And I'm wondering if that's similar or different in some way. I mean, because it's happening in Europe, it's got all of the Nazi paraphernalia attached to it. But that's when I think communism and nationalism mixed together, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, well, there's certainly like some affinity between like very nationalistic communist movements and fascism.
I joked about them in my latest video on fascism, where I said that the Nazis were pretending to be socialist, or at least said socialist stuff, so that they could get people who were like the lefty pole of 1930s Germany.
Yes, yeah, I thought that was a very important point that you made in the video about. I thought you did the best job I've ever seen of anyone refuting this idea. Well, not National Socialism has the word socialism, so isn't this in fact a left-wing movement? Like, no, like there's reasons why they would put the word socialism in that have nothing to do with any kind of Marxist socialism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, socialism is older than Marxism to its own extent.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's so weird what's going on right now. I just like I said I was talking with one of my supervisors a while back, and I think I said something along the lines of, "Did you notice that around 2011, just the world stopped making sense, or it started making sense in a very different way?"
What is it about 2011?
I don't know. It's just like I actually. Maybe put a bit forward, 2014 or 2013, like when you had, because I did my first master's on American Islamophobia post 9/11, and right after I submitted it, and right after I like got approved and I won the game. They said yes, you can have an MA after your name now. Then like it was the summer of 2014, and that was when ISIS decided to enter the news.
Yeah.
And ISIS is like making the war on terror a completely new thing. It's really strange. And then that fall was Gamergate. And then like 2015 was like the beginning of the weird ass American presidential election that drove everyone crazy. And here we are.
Yeah, it's there's something to be said for that. I think maybe 2014 does initiate a new period of some kind. I don't know if I would say that it stops making sense. I mean, I guess because everything in retrospect can be made to make sense, right? I think it surprised a lot of people at the time, certainly including me.
Yeah, it's weird. I guess like it's one of the reasons why I really like doing Step Back now is because things started to only make sense if you have to go a little bit further back.
You have to go further back, yes.
There's like trends that are like coming back from the dead that people thought were behind us, but they really weren't.
So as a historian, do you have any, and as a YouTuber, do you have any particular interest in what internet history is going to look like or what it already looks like?
That is actually my dissertation.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm trying to study 9/11 narratives
online.
Online. Well,
yeah.
I'm trying to do a media thing, but one of the biggest source bases I'm going to study is the edit history of the 9/11 Wikipedia page.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's really fun to find stuff like periods where you find huge amounts of edits, but not much net change day to day. And it's these periods where the 9/11 truthers are getting together and saying, like, let's just like try to keep our stuff on the Wikipedia page as long as possible, just to get as many people's eyes on it as we can.
Right.
Before, with the the people who run everything just like lock it down. But yeah, the idea of how we understand the past with the internet being this, keeping us in this ever-presentness, like things don't seem to be allowed to get old and be behind us.
Yeah. Oh gosh, isn't that horrifying?
Yeah, like I said, I've TA'd students who now don't have memories of 9/11,
Oh
and
yeah.
yet it seems that even though that's the case, it doesn't feel like a historical event yet. It doesn't feel far
Yeah.
enough back to be capital H history.
I mean, it's still not certainly not as often as it used to be, but it still like definitely plays a role in like in particular American political discourse.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't really following American politics at this point, but before 9/11, I mean, we were both like 12, so I guess it doesn't
Right.
really matter for us. But um, the flag pin, I think, is a post 9/11 thing where like that's just a thing you have to do now if you're in the public spotlight.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, it was definitely used as a way to kind of mandate a certain type of performative patriotism. And that still kind of goes on. I mean, what's weird, Trump, I think, to me, actually represents a kind of veering away from most of those attitudes. And it's even though he's, very, America first and all that, he also, I mean, he insults the military. He insults five-star families, or he insults Gold Star families. I mean, he insults John McCain. Like he has no reverence whatsoever for any of the usual institutions, uh, and so yeah, I feel like Trump is in some way. I mean, even though he is like this bastion of Islamophobia as well, it's a different sort of. It feels different to me than the like post 9/11 way of doing this. Well, partially because like American politics post 9/11 was so dominated by like neocon politicians, and so 9/11 was this justification for wars. Whereas now the new right wing is more. They say they're isolationists anyway, um, and it's more about domestic racism.
Yeah, that is a good call, and actually that'd be a good question to launch off that for. So you kind of, I see like you have a very nuanced and complicated um, position at the moment about what's going on with the kind of political wars on the American left and center and everything like that. And part of the right wing change that happened involves a lot of weird alliances with those neocons, like the kind of lionization of George Bush and stuff. Do you have anything to think about that kind of like the fact that like Bill Kristol is now part of the hashtag resistance and everything?
Oh, the sudden progressive, apparently forgiving neoconservatism and George Bush. Oh, yeah, I think it's an appalling lack of memory for what those years were like and what those people did. Um, I think that I don't, the neocons don't trust Trump, but that's no reason to trust the neocons.
Fair enough. Yeah, if I were following your kind of your thought patterns through videos and streams and stuff, you were kind of before the 2016 election, you kind of were like a liberal-ish person with
Yeah,
like
I was
left-wing
much.
tendencies.
I mean, I was soothed into complacency by Obama presidency, which was certainly not perfect. But oh, he was so nice, and just look at him. He was perfect. But I mean, he wasn't. So this is my caricature of my past view, right? But like, there was a sense in which Obama being president, America had elected a black president, a Democrat, who uh, was a professor of constitutional law and who was just so reasonable and soothing, like he and just like personally spotless, and there was just a sense that like, okay, problem solved. Well, no, not at all. I mean, of course, the minute he was elected, right, there's this Tea Party movement that was the backlash to Obama, the first backlash to Obama. And in some ways, I think the Tea Party was like preparation. It was like the rehearsal for the Trump rallies and so on. I think it's a lot of the same people. It seems to be the same demographics. But the Tea Party at the time, well, for one thing, the racism, I mean, we all kind of knew it was there, but it was very difficult to say that it was there because it was just difficult to prove, and we see their explicit talking points were all sort of a libertarian bent almost, right? Or sort of like these Ron Paul things. It was all about taxation and about the deficit. I don't know if anyone remembers American politics circa like 2010 or 2012. All the Republicans were going on about the deficit. Oh God, we've got to balance the budget, inflation. This was Paul Ryan's whole thing, Rand Paul's whole thing. No, I haven't heard in the last year one person mention the fucking deficit, which just goes to show I don't think anyone really cared about it in the first place. I mean, this was a substitute issue for something else. I mean, and I think in retrospect with the Tea Party, the issue was like a black president, more or less, and so people, I think most people probably didn't think of themselves as like, oh, I can't stand the idea of a black president, but like, I think people felt it on some level, or like a lot of white Americans felt in some intuitive way that they were losing their grip on the country. And it caused a kind of panic, which, a panic that wasn't sort of aware of itself, but which now has become made more explicit by Trump. I mean, the success of Trump is what he did is he would get up on stage and just say what people were thinking, fuck political correctness. And by that, what's meant is let's stop I'm tired of even having to pretend that I don't think America should be for white people. You know what I mean? And so he sort of he pulled the curtain aside. So in a sense, it's horrible because now what we have is an explicitly racist movement that it has seriously some real prominence in American politics. I mean, he's the president, so it's not nothing. But on the other hand, it's in a sense we have a much clearer understanding of what's going on, and we at least know what the problem is. Whereas when the problem was like so obscured by this talk about the deficit and about taxation, it was more, we were having a kind of substitute conversation for what the real conversation was.
Yeah, I think I saw that from a different angle because like when I was doing my MA research, I was studying Islamophobia and the war on terror period. And what I noticed, and this was part of my conclusions, one of my like tiny discoveries that I can like walk away with as a thing that I did. And that is that the nature of Islamophobia in America kind of changes, and the name actually makes sense. Like when it started, it was Islamophobia. It was a fear-driven response. Like they were like just panicking over how scary any Muslim was. But then sometime around the 9/11 mosque, I sort of noticed it transformed into just general hatred.
Aggression, yeah.
And I was saying that like it's actually gotten worse over time rather than better, which is what you'd expect.
Yes. Well, I mean, and a piece of data for that in support of that idea is that right after 9/11, if you look at Bush's speech, like Bush got up and said like it's very important like not to be, I'm not praising Bush, he says very important not to be, he didn't use the word Islamophobia, but he said to understand that like Muslims are also Americans and that this is not Islam. Most Muslims aren't implicated in this. That's not what Trump says at all. Trump says we have to name the enemy. It's Islam. Like, so Trump is in a sense, in his rhetoric at least, much more anti-Islam or Islamophobic than George Bush was, which is not to say that George Bush was great by any means, in fact, so far in terms of policy, in terms of like actual results, Bush may well have been worse than Trump. Trump has not, started any massive wars, for instance. But I think that in terms of the kind of political rhetoric used and the kinds of emotions being played to, Trump has embraced just outright. Yeah, he's harnessed the bigotry and he supports it and reinforces it. Whereas Bush was at least trying to make a show of hitting the brakes on that.
Yeah, there was, I think it was like the PBS Frontline documentary about the 2008 election, where you can kind of start to see the seeds of this, where after Sarah Palin got the VP nomination,
yes,
apparently John McCain had like a moment with her where he was like, after this election's over, the radio shows and the internet people are going to try to make you a hero, and don't listen to them.
Uh-huh.
And I think that was them talking, or that was kind of the idea that the sea change was going on their side in a big way. in many ways, these people, these populist groups, I hate the term populist because it's been abused. It's an abused word now.
Yeah.
But the like this right wing wave that has taken over the American right seems to be more or less people tapping into something that was already there instead of like dancing around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's definitely not generated from nothing. Like this is a thing that's been, I think, kind of sort of it's been repressed, and that's sort of let itself out. And Sarah Palin is an interesting case because I think in some ways she's sort of a precursor to Trump. She's a candidate with no serious policy ideas, who just sort of was on the ticket to appeal to the certain kind of white chauvinism. And I think that for McCain, she was an embarrassment. I mean, also the thing is, like, it's interesting that Palin was so much less appealing to huge groups of people than Trump is. And Palin, I mean, thinking about the way Palin's gender interacts with this is also, I think, it's interesting to me, because I think there were a lot of like small town America was her big phrase, and a lot of this demographic rural white women I think really loved her and identified with her. But my internet experience is that men, the kind of rational skeptic men that we have on YouTube, fucking hated Sarah Palin. But what did she do that was meaningfully different than what Trump does? Well, not much, except that Trump is this big masculine bully who grabs women, and I simply think it's a matter of gender that they like Trump and not Palin. But yes, the Republicans, I mean, what happened in 2012, right, is that they didn't have this element, right? Romney and Ryan, well, those were just these guys. I mean, okay, there was like a little, there were sometimes the race thing the race thing's always there if it's American politics. There's never a moment where race is completely not kind of tinging the conversation. But Romney and Ryan repressed that element much more than, even than Palin did. And they lost. So I think that part of the reason why Trump won and why people were willing to get behind Trump is they realized, like, the way to win is to be racist. And
yeah, I remember in the wake of 2012, there was this thought that, like, I remember I had this like really old British American politics professor at that time, and he was like saying, like, well, now the election's over, obviously the path forward is that the Republican Party needs to change tack, and the way they're going to do it is they're going to appeal to Latin American, like Latino Americans, because they're a very conservative bloc of the America, but they don't vote because of racial issues. So like they're going to go in that direction. And I was like,
Well, I remember thinking when in 2012, when Romney lost, I thought, okay, this is it for this Republican Party based on whiteness. And what I somehow thought that what the lesson was like, because I know at the time, even we were criticizing Romney for totally failing to reach out right to Hispanic people, to African American voters. He just didn't have any interest in appealing to them. And so I thought, okay, from here on out, even the Republicans are going to run a kind of multiracial party that's not going to, I was thinking, okay, the Southern strategy is probably done. Boy, was that the exact opposite of what happened. The Southern strategy is back with a vengeance.
Yeah, the only things I can think now, and I mean, if anything, 2016 taught me to not predict the future. But what 2016 makes me think about right at the moment is I'm a little scared for who is smarter than Trump is sitting and taking notes.
Yes.
And what I think 2020 is going to be a really, I feel like that election's not going to surprise us as much, but 2024 will be a weird election. And I think there's going to be some where like all the 2016 fights are going to come back, but they're going to come back in a much more sophisticated way.
I mean, I have no faith at this point in my ability to predict 8 years in the future, but that is definitely, based on the way things are now, that is definitely, I mean, this is what Ta-Nehisi Coates said in this article called The First White President, or America's First White President, that he wrote about Trump a couple months ago. He said that, like, as abhorrent as Trump is, the real thing that's frightening about him is the possibility that he reveals for someone much, as you said, much smarter and much savvier and more skillful, and you having much more traditional political experience and able to actually accomplish things in a way that Trump can't, taking notes from Trump, using the same racial politics to get elected, and then actually doing devastation with more effective governance. So it is a terrifying thought. Yes.
Yeah, I have nightmares about whenever it happens, the next Republican primary.
I know. God damn.
It's going to be horrifying. I also imagine that soon coming up that it looks like the Democratic primaries are also going to be another slog.
Oh yeah. I mean, the only thing that can really save us from that nightmare Republican primary, as I see it, is if it's just a landslide loss for Trump in 2020. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen.
It does look like this is making me sad. It looked like for a little bit that the DNC was actually listening and changing positions on stuff, but then they the Tom Perez thing that just came out was like, oh, I guess not. I guess they're still like trying to make sure that a multimillionaire makes it to the head of the pack.
This is the frightening thing, right? Is that the kind of liberal left wing of American politics also seems to be on the verge of, seems to be splitting in half. I mean, in the same, which was what we saw in the 2016 primary, right? There's the Bernie side and the Hillary side. The Democratic establishment, effectively, and then this, I would say, what feels to me more new, left wing of the party that's just has been not really a part of our politics for decades. That is suddenly back. I mean, as a result, presumably, of the economic downturn in 2008 and so on, we now have a sudden socialist presence in our politics that we never had. That we didn't have, at least for several decades.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I think that maybe all right, you can tell me if I'm wrong on this because you're on the inside and you could probably know more about this than me, but I start to see it as these are the limits of the way that the structure of the American political system works because of the Electoral College and the winner-take-all elections and everything like that.
Yeah,
you're kind of stuck in these boxes and things get kind of rigid. Well, if it happened here, we have a Bernie party and a Hillary party. They are two separate parties.
Yeah.
And depending upon how mad one is at the other, one grows and one shrinks.
Yeah.
Right now, the Hillarys are one, or Justin Trudeau, or whatever.
It's definitely true that our election system, it's really you're really going to have one party or the other. So, unless something dramatically changes. So it makes it very difficult for there to be a kind of split because in England, for instance, you can have a moderate liberal party and a further left party, and they can both win seats in parliament, and they can both, whereas in the United States, these would be in direct competition with each other against the conservatives. And not to mention, as you said, the Electoral College, which makes, which basically systemically favors Republicans. But it's interesting because what we thought was impossible, which was someone like Bernie winning, I now think actually is possible. The big obstacle is, Bernie was exactly right about the campaign finance problem is a major obstacle to anyone who's not of the kind of Democratic establishment getting in. But Trump, the Republican establishment, at first, at least, was desperately trying to get rid of him, and they could not. And he won, despite being this total, not outsider to power, but being an outsider to at least the inner Washington politics, right? So you could get a leftist figure, I think, in using some of the same things. The person I'm imagining is someone who does kind of rant in the way that Bernie did about income inequality, someone who's able to
just someone who's a bit more ice cold, as you would say.
Yeah, exactly. And someone who, I think I know a lot of the Bernie supporting people I know kind of think that, what we need is class consciousness in America. We need working class people to to develop this awareness of themselves as working class and to vote in their own interests for once. I mean, maybe, but I think that, so my thought about this is that actually the racial thing, again, may turn out to be more important. And you need to, what the next person needs to do, that neither Hillary nor Bernie were really great at, is get the African-American vote, get a Hispanic vote, get these people to show up to the polls. That's going to make a huge difference. And because there's a lot of white people who will vote for whatever the Democrat is. And I think,
yeah, I feel like you are particularly well equipped. I don't want to, like, throw requests at you, but you'd be really well equipped to be making a video about the identity politics topic. I feel like that would be a very strong thing to come out of you as someone who has straddled different identities in like the past 6 months.
Yes.
And at the same time in dialogue with this like strategy versus principles in the left wing and like all sorts of stuff. I think that
Yeah.
I don't know, it feels really.
Yeah, that's probably a topic that I will cover. I'm doing, yeah. I also am interested in having, in the form of these kinds of live streams and things, like more of a dialogue with the kind of economic left. Because I guess that you could say there's a kind of, you could call it like old left, new left divide, but that's not really accurate at this point. I think it's, what is it? It's more of like, you could disparage them. One side is the brocialists, and you could disparage the other side as social justice warriors. So people who are concerned with like, and people, I'm definitely considered a representative, justifiably definitely considered a representative of the social justice warrior side, because my main attention is mostly devoted to gender and sexuality and race, these classic identity politics topics. Whereas there's other people who think that really is a distraction for the left, and that what we really need to be focused on is class and the economic side of things. I wanted to have a dialogue with those people. I mean, I think, of course, the answer is that you have to be focused on both.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am at the moment.
Yeah.
Because I came to this, like, I don't know if you can see there's like the Bernie Sanders action figure there and the Bernie Sanders thing. And so like, I definitely came from a direction, but then again, I became a fan of Bernie Sanders after his 2010 filibuster of the Bush tax cuts.
Following him for longer than many people.
Yeah, I like when Bernie Sanders was running for president, I was more like, damn, like I've been like hoping that would happen for a long time, but more so than like. But I think that you're onto something when you're talking about the primary thing, because I think that when Sanders started running, it was kind of like when he finally got onto the attention of the world, of the national stage, it was already too late. Like, it was like in America, you have to be like registered for things so early, and everything happens so early that like by the time people even knew that he existed, which would probably be after Iowa, there was like, it was too late to like register, and so like a bunch of people couldn't register as Democrats, and like everything just kind of. But now might be different. I don't know. There's also going to be a bigger field. Like there's tons of people sharpening their blades for the primaries already.
Yeah, this is a tangent, but it just gave me a really random memory of being in a Korean restaurant late at night in 2016, pretty drunk, and seeing on the TV the New Hampshire primary results come in, and seeing that Trump had won and Bernie had won, and I would just have like a psychedelic experience, thinking that this could actually be the election.
Yeah, that actually comes to mind too. With there's like a podcast or something where they were looking at the most demographically representative town in America, where like the demographics of the city completely reflect the class, race, gender, every axis of America the best. And they said that when they talked to them about what was going on, it was all about talking about Sanders and Trump. And it's like, oh, that was the conversation that was happening. But but on the identity versus, I really don't like the idea that there's an identity versus economic thing, because I came to it as I know that I basically am your cat character in some ways. I don't like being a jerk. That's the only difference.
Yeah. Well, although the cat character is the cat character is a leftist across the board. Like, she's not just an economic, I don't think, because she also accuses everyone of being a racist. Mm-hmm. But I think that the idea of a battle between the economic left and the social justice left is a horrible, toxic idea that's going to destroy us. So I think
it's creating a lot of really bad false dichotomies that I don't like.
Yes, I agree. And I think that that is something that we should be working to overcome.
I agree. We are having this discussion here in Canada as well, because we have a prime minister who campaigned as like a super progressive with all these things and then decided to literally do none of them.
Yeah.
Or do one. He did one, which was his like throwaway to millennials, which is he's going to legalize weed next year. That's the only thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, you do if you're going to do one thing, you do the thing that sort of benefits corporations, right?
Yeah. Well, like one of the things that he was planning on doing was destroying first past the post. He was going to push to either do a ranked ballot or proportional representation. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, he learned very quickly that his party is everybody's second choice.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, right, everybody votes for us because it's strategic, so we can't possibly do that.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, and that's, of course, you know, what people, I worry about that too here, that even if we did get a progressive, very progressive president in the office, like they wouldn't be able to get anything done.
I do think, though, like, I know that that would probably happen because it seems like it's pretty much impossible for anybody to get anything done at the moment.
Yes.
But just having the ability to have somebody of that kind of bent talking and having every one of their things they say, like, rebroadcast on television and being able to, like, point out things and even, like, the executive order stuff. Like, I feel like it would still be better than not. And I do think that the conversation would still have changed in a big way. Like, I would love if we had like President Young Bernie, whoever that's going to be.
Right.
If he becomes president,
I like that.
If he becomes president in 2020, and if like say the Democrats like he like tries to push like free medicine for everybody, and like a bunch of Democrats say no, he can literally get everyone's attention and just come up and say, all right, politician A takes money from this, and this. This politician B takes money from this, and this. And like that will be the highlight of the day. And that's usually a thing that just gets brushed under the rug. And that would be a productive conversation.
Yeah. Well, and it would be, I mean, we have to also prepare ourselves because like for the way that a very economically progressive president would be smeared by the right and by the establishment, because we haven't really sort of experienced the full force of that yet. I mean, there's a lot of ways they could go with it. I remember Obama in the 2008 campaign, there was this famous like Joe the Plumber thing, right?
Where I remember.
Joe the Plumber says, I'm a plumber, and like all plumbers, like all successful plumbers, I make $200,000 a year. And why should I have to pay more taxes because I'm successful? And Obama said that, well, like we have to spread the wealth around, or something was the phrase he used. And Obama wants to spread the wealth around. They got a lot of mileage out of that. But part of it also is that Obama, again, there's a race thing involved. The socialist, this is actually, I guess, a potential problem for my plan to have a economic leftist who also appeals to non-white people, which is that when you have a non-white politician advocating leftist economic positions, that gets racialized, or it gets there's a really hard racial edge to that a lot of white Americans feel like, oh gosh, they feel like wealth is going to be taken from white people and distributed to black people. And that was, I think was clearly kind of hovering around the whole Joe the Plumber phenomenon.
I mean, that's as old as the welfare queen phenomenon.
Oh yeah, it goes back to Reagan. It goes back even earlier than that. Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez. So I guess the answer is there's no way to win. Let's hit up the LCBO or the liquor store.
Exactly. Yeah, that's get out the King Cobra.
Oh man, actually, it's interesting because like there's all sorts of other weird phenomenons, because like everything comes to us in weird ways. Like one of the immediate post-Trump things that happened is that there's a push to get rid of the United States as a third space country. Which for everyone out there, it's a country, like if you're a refugee and you're escaping from oppression and you land in a country, a third space country, you can't then, like say you were like heading to Canada as a refugee and you wanted to go there, but you stopped in the United States, they could technically say, well, you're already in a safe country, so you just stay there. They were thinking of taking that away because we had this surge of people who were, it was typically like, they're from like Sudan or something. There's like a country like that had temporary allowable refugee status like a long time ago, but now it was like threatened to be taken away. And a whole bunch of them were like just running across the border into Canada. And because it's Canada, they were like, there was like issues because they were like freezing to death and stuff. And we were trying to like start things up to try and help them get into the country. It was, I don't know, they were Haitians. That was it. It was Haitians because they were brought in after the earthquake into the United States on like a refugee visa type thing. And then when like Trump was trying to take it away, they were kind of scared about that. I don't want to talk too much about Canada because most people don't care. So
no, we should care a little more than we do.
It's all right. It's all right. But it also is because I see American politics. I follow it very closely as like a spectator.
Oh yeah, well, so much the world does. I mean, when you're American, you also have like, you have very little incentive to learn about foreign politics because everyone else cares so much about yours. You can always talk to them about that. I don't know. I actually now have gotten really bad. I've slipped back into just only following American politics. For a while though, I was really closely following European politics in the wake of Trump winning because it seemed, you know, first Brexit, then Trump. I was like, oh God, like how many of these pins are going to get knocked over here? And so I followed the French election very well, which thank God did not go to the national front. But since then, it seems like things are kind of like, I feel like Europe, like Western Europe at this point, I'm less worried than I was about it going full fash. But yeah, it's still danger.
I would be, I'd be scared seeing how Brexit turns out when when the rubber meets the road on that.
Yeah, if it does.
Economic disaster that could come out of that could lead.
Yeah.
But also, it's become very personal too because my wife is a Trump UG.
Oh, from America.
She filed for permanent residency like very soon after Trump got elected.
Good move.
Yeah. And yeah, it was fun because the day she got her health card, it was like, oh, it's the first time in her entire life that she's been protected by a healthcare service. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like, maybe this is just my like being so like, I don't know, like spoiled by it. But like, if I went to the United States, I'd just be like, I have to do everything to not get sick. I'd be drinking green smoothies, and I'd be like, you know, getting into running and everything. So they're like, no, you can't get sick. You just can't get sick. If you do,
it's like a high stakes gambling just living in this country.
In a lot of ways.
I have health insurance. I have on Medicaid for a little while longer, but I'm not making too much money, so I have to figure out what I'm going to do. I don't even know.
Do they have anything for like, you'd think the United States would have something for the independent businesswoman.
Yeah, exactly. You would think. I don't know. I'm looking into it.
Like you are literally the example of bootstrapping yourself.
Right. That's I'm supposed to be the example. Right.
Mm-hmm. And not to mention, like you were hungry. Like I saw that you you've had jobs where you were like a tour guide in DC and you were an Uber driver. You are the American dream.
Yeah, I mean, not exactly, because my parents are middle class, so it's not like I'm like poor and I grew up in like an impoverished, trailer park or something. Like there's a difference between being broke and being poor. Being poor means that you don't have a safety net. I mean, my parents would have taken me in if I'd couldn't pay rent anymore. So for me, the worst threat was mostly just the humiliation of having to move back in with the family, and But still, that was like some motivation. And when I was an Uber driver and a tour guide and all this terrible stuff, like just having no money is bad in America. It's just haunting you at every moment, and your little calculations of which laundry detergent you can afford and whether Chinese food means you can't pay rent, and it's terrible.
Yeah, that does sound. rough. I mean, I am a grad student, so I know
Yes,
know
yeah,
the
yeah,
full
yeah.
extent.
I mean, it's even worse, of course, if you're actually poor and like you like literally can't get health insurance on top of that, and or I mean, most people can now because of Obamacare, but you know, that's constantly being threatened to be ripped away.
Yeah, well, because of my wife, like I actually do feel very, like the other day went to the doctor, got the blood done and everything like that, and I realized like I just walked in, it happened, and then I walked out, and
Oh
I realized
yeah.
like wow, I am so lucky for that.
Yeah. Well, even like the Medicaid is pretty good. Like for me, like for like the trans care stuff, like there's like an informed consent clinic in Baltimore, and with the Medicaid card, it's like being in Canada. It's like heaven. Yeah. You walk in, like they don't there wasn't even like a copay. Just like walk out, get my prescription, and like it's so harmless. It really there's just no reason why we can't have this in America.
I don't know how much you want to talk about that, but it's going well.
The transition?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you're trans, transitioning is a really great thing to do.
So yeah, it seems like from following your Twitter, you seem very happy. You seem
Yeah,
like you're enjoying it
definitely.
quite a bit.
For the most part, yes. I mean, you know, and it's like difficult in some ways, but the difficult things are all worth it.
Yeah, your story kind of mirrors a friend of mine who I won't like give any details, but she's joining like the RCMP
Uh,
as a trans woman, but also like something about like the way that she was before because of her dysphoria and everything like that. She actually was like super thin as like right before she started everything. It's like um, it's been a whole thing, and I've been like following her progress, and I'm like, I mean, I have complicated views on the police, but the fact that there's a trans Mountie out there makes me happy.
Jeez, yeah, this makes me happy too.
And the other thing too, and like you were talking about the racial coding that happened with Obama,
Yeah,
we just had this just shows how Canada is very faux progressive in a lot of ways. We just had our first major party leader who was a person of color ever,
yeah.
just last month or this month, and he got his first interview with CBC was a bunch of questions about the Tamil Tigers.
Oh God,
So he is a Sikh.
where is he? Okay, yeah,
He's a Sikh, and he was when he was like a younger person, he was a Sikh rights activist,
yeah,
and so he was not even part of the like the religion we're supposed to hate right now. He is just
yeah.
a regular part of a religion that is often oppressed by people in other places,
Right, they
and
become the victims of ignorant Islamophobia.
exactly.
Yeah,
But like this is someone who actually knew his stuff and actually asked him questions about a Sikh terrorist group from the
yeah,
1970s that assassinated
unbelievable. I
a
mean,
politician like in 77 or something.
that's fascinating because it mirrors very closely the attempts to link Obama to the Weather Underground or to other, the Obama sympathizes with terrorists. He's a secret Muslim. It's very similar to what he went through. Although, like you say, yeah, I mean, one reason why Obama winning was so great is that it was like it seemed, I don't know, it seemed to make America like I was so proud of it because it was like, yeah, the world thinks that we're racist, and as a country collectively, yeah, we're pretty racist. But on the other hand, we just elected a racial minority president, that white people voted for, and so like that seemed like just like a huge accomplishment and a huge stand taken against the racist element. But it's like let's wait for France to elect an Algerian or well, London has a Muslim mayor now, but it's a little bit hard still to imagine a Pakistani prime minister.
Yeah, that would be something. I mean, we also the other faux progressive thing is we had a female prime minister
Mm,
for 30 days because she basically was the fall woman for our Ronald Reagan. And when the conservatives knew that they were going to go down in flames, the conservative leader was like, "All right, I'm done. Here, have Kim Campbell. She'll be prime minister now." And then she like lost the election in a huge landslide,
yeah.
mostly because she made fun of the opponent for having a partially paralyzed face. But
Ooh, that sounds like something Trump would do and get away with.
yeah, this was 1993 though, and
Yeah.
also the Progressive Conservatives, which was the name of the party at the time, they also signed NAFTA, which was really unpopular. And then liberals said they wouldn't sign NAFTA. Then they got elected and signed NAFTA. So
yeah, there's a
I guess like the only thing I have to say is like when it came today, it seems like the Obama election feels more like an accomplishment for Obama than the United States at this point.
It's really, it's hard to think about. I remember shortly after Trump won, going back and watching Obama's 2008 inauguration with like Aretha Franklin on stage, and I just cried for like 15 minutes.
Oh man. I remember my mind going to Cenk Uygur freaking out when Obama got elected, and how moved Cenk Uygur was, and seeing where he is today compared to then, I was like, oh man, poor guy.
Yeah. Well, we're just gonna have to be tough.
It's gonna be a hard fight. I thought maybe we could ride this hashtag resistance thing to victory, but it seems I don't know how the scene is on that.
I mean, the hell of it is, it's just like 2020 is so far away. Like, we're less than a year into this horrible nightmare. It's going to go on for 8 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
But there is, it will be interesting to see the first midterm election that people actually care about.
Yes, that's true. And that will reveal at least some information about where we're at as a country.
Yeah, because like, not only is it like the 2018 election is going to come up soon, it's going to be pretty interesting to see how Congress works out. Also, I think there might be some interesting things with the Senate because it's all of the 2012 senators.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Which I think was like when Joe Lieberman lost his seat, and that's when Bernie Sanders last got reelected. And so Bernie Sanders is running for senator again in 2018. I know because it, what was the headline? That he betrayed the Democratic Party because he announced he's going to run as an independent. And it's like, come on, it's part of his brand. Yeah. Democrats, you know how brands work. You literally just work for those.
Right. Yeah, well, it's going to be hard to watch. I hope it turns out okay.
Don't worry, you'll probably by November of 2018 be at 450,000 subscribers or something.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have an eye patch and a scar down the side of my face.
That'd be badass. That's a good character. You could have like alternate universe version of yourself or something.
Well, that was actually an idea I had for Tabby, is that she would become more battle weathered as time goes on. Also, maybe more of a furry.
Okay. So I did get a question about. Okay, this is a question I don't think either of us are going to know much about, but I'll just toss out there.
Sure.
So apparently Putin's up for re-election next year too.
Oh.
And my guess is that because he controls all of the state media, that he's just going to like walk into being president. And he also doesn't seem against like killing people who criticize him.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know much about Russian politics. I did not even know that he was up for re-election. So my answer to this is probably not going to be very informed. But the sense I get is that, there's elections over there are not super meaningful at the moment. And the opposition is suppressed. Yeah.
Just as an example, the Russian Federation has term limits on president of 8 years.
Mm.
He ran for president and then was president for 8 years, just right after Boris Yeltsin, then took a term off where he became prime minister and the president was Dmitry Medvedev or something like that.
Yeah.
And then ran for president again and won again as like a second. So like they're now saying that the Constitution is going to say that you can be president for 2 8-year terms. And so in 2024, I think that term comes up, and then we'll have to see if he's just going to like just say screw it and go full like commissar general secretary and
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, there's always a vague threat that someone could do that here. That Trump could do it. I certainly don't think he has any principles that would stop him. Although I think it would be pragmatically nearly impossible. But right after Trump won, I went to a lecture by Nadia, I can't remember her last name, from Pussy Riot. And she was talking about Putin and how much Trump reminded her of Putin. And like, everyone in the audience wanted to know, what do we do? What do we do? And she was like, I don't know. I tried criticizing Putin and I went to jail. Like, so.
What do you think of all of the like second Red Scare stuff or the third Red Scare stuff?
Oh, well, what do you mean?
Like the internet saying that everybody is a secret Russian agent, or how much the whole Russia angle.
The opposition to Russia on the basis of Russia intervening in the election and so on.
Yeah, but like how big it's gotten and how it's expanded everywhere.
I honestly, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know how much, and I think it's difficult to say exactly still how much Russian influence there was in Trump's campaign. I mean, definitely some. There's like sometimes they speculate about whether there is like Russian influence in some of our alternative media, which is to say, if you look at Russia Today, which is like the Russian, like it's like an English language, you know about it, but Fox, kind of Russia Fox News, basically, that's represents a kind of anti-American and pro-Russian point of view to an American audience. They report in a very similar way to not Breitbart so much as almost like InfoWars. They were big on like vaccines causing autism and all kinds of things. They were this whole conspiratorial approach, yet conspiratorial anti-establishment, yet pro-Trump somehow thing. I don't know. Is it conceivable that Russia's sponsoring our media in some way? It is, I think, but I don't have proof, so who knows?
Yeah, the Russia Today is such a weird site to look at because in some ways it tries to sell itself as hyper left wing,
right?
But yet it's
not.
Yeah, it's like this. It's like we're this progressive website. We really, really hate establishment Democrats, but we're not going to say a single thing about Trump.
Yeah,
and that's like its thing. And it's like, oh, I see. This is how it works.
Well, we know that for whatever reason, the Russian establishment likes Trump being in power. I mean, lots of foreign leaders like Trump being in power.
It's not the ones that we want to like.
Oh yeah, just not the ones we want to like. Exactly. Yeah.
I think that maybe Russia just, I don't know what their ambitions are at the moment. I mean, there's people who speculate, but I think they're just trying to be a power again.
Yeah, and for us to be destabilized, which I think is also kind of, but it's the same reason that the Chinese Communist Party has I think Trump has been very useful for their propaganda anyway, in that he kind of represents everything that every way American democracy is supposed to fail according to their worldview. This bumbling populist corporatist idiot elected by the masses who don't know any better. It's their take on it.
Oh yeah,
this is exactly why we shouldn't have democracy in China, right?
Oh gosh, I did say this, and I did say this to my tutorial people. What do they call them? Students. That's what they call them these days. And I always talked about this, and this is something that I would say that would get them all riled up, but then I wouldn't say that I supported it, but it was interesting, and it was that, can you imagine how unstable the world would be if tomorrow China and Saudi Arabia became democratic countries? Now, think about things like the price of oil every time there would be a Saudi Arabian election, or the price of everything if China had an election. Now, I don't say I like democracy. It is a good thing. I am pro-democracy. I always just think neoliberalism really just requires a few countries to not be democratic, or else it destabilizes the whole capitalist project.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, it's true that global capitalism, as we know it, relies on there being these places where, I mean, it's helpful to have dictatorships with easily exploitable populations, especially in areas where there's lots of natural resources, whether it's, African dictators or the Saudi monarchy, right? You can get, or just the Chinese slave labor, essentially, to have the manufacturing done or the natural resource gathering done by people who you do not get any part of the wealth of our economic system is the kind of invisible secret to the whole system, right?
Yeah, I think you brought that up in your discussion with Tabby, where you're like, I like things. And you're like, even though some things were made by like a slave, well, you should feel bad about that.
Yeah. So we should feel bad about it, but it's also difficult to say what to do about it, I think, because a lot of times the far left discourse is about specifically, oh, we have to raise class consciousness among the working class here in America or here in Canada or here in England. Well, which working class? I mean, part of the problem is that, like, I guess a lot of the working class in the United States is not manufacturing; it's like service. All that manufacturing is being done in China, and like, what are we supposed to do about that? I mean, we could refuse to do trade with them.
Yeah, but then if we also if we boycotted Chinese goods or something, the only people who would suffer would be Chinese working class.
Right. So it's very difficult to know. I mean, isn't this like the original Marxist idea that the revolution has to be like international and global, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Boy, is it hard to imagine that happening?
Yeah, this is the part where the kind of way that I read Marx is starting to differ from a lot of people.
Yeah,
and it's starting to, it's something I'm just playing with now, which was that I don't think I believe in a lot of the idea that like the revolution is something that is going to be like something that officially happens, like there's going to be the capital R revolution with signs and a takeover of everything, but more that like the core of Marx, the whole like base and superstructure Basin thing, is that our society is a reflection of our economy, and that like when the economy changes, when the way that we make things change, our society, our relationship to those things changes.
Yeah.
And that, in my mind, I think that what communism, socialism, what Marx is talking about there is this idea that is us approaching post-scarcity, which I think he, like many people who predict the future, overestimated how fast that would happen.
Yeah.
And I think that communism might be one of the, or the way that Marx talks about it, I think that communism might be one of those as we approach post-scarcity things.
Yeah.
And would be tough to do right now. And that's why, like, if you try to do the revolution, the capital R revolution, before we have the technology to do so, you end up with really weird stuff. And that's what, like, a lot of the, like, why communism has had such a hard time taking root and doing anything significant.
Well, and the other interesting thing is that, I mean, I think this is a deviation from Marxist predictions, is that where there have been communist revolutions have been in many of the places least close to post-scarcity. Russia instead of Germany. Small Latin American or African countries, and not the United States and England.
Mm-hmm.
So
I wonder if Marx just means something different in their context.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough. It's been I'm not enough of an expert in Marx to be able to say.
Yeah, I feel, I don't know how there's the people who like really like, you know, the people who've like super well read on Marx, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something like Mexi. Do you know Mexi?
Oh yeah.
How, like, you know, the people who like have basically made reading Marx their entire career, and it's like,
I should really do a live stream with her.
Yeah, she'd probably be able to.
All of this, yeah. Yeah.
But I'm such like a techno person. I'm like that. I like the fully automated luxury gay space communism. I like that.
Oh yeah, I want that. Well, I like that idea. I like that notion as well. Yeah, I think that's the kind of most pleasant thought about the future.
I want Star Trek.
I
want Star Trek to be real.
Yeah, so we all think That's, I think, a vision worth holding on to, and a vision that's kind of been, it seems, lost to some extent. The idea that what our goal is to overcome all racisms and prejudices about gender and also economic inequality while we're at it, yet have the ability, have the resources to explore and flourish in, technologically and intellectually.
Kind of why I'm a little disappointed about the Star Trek Discovery show, because like it doesn't have that, and it doesn't have the happy edge to it at all.
Yeah, because it was kind of utopian, right? Or the original series was very utopian in a way. Yeah, well, and especially the disappointing thing to me is the return of like nationalism. Like, oh God, like do we really have to do this again?
Again, I hate to like quote your videos and stuff like that, but yeah. There's two lessons, right? Don't invade Russia and don't let nationalism take root.
Right, don't let nationalism take hold in Western Europe. Yeah.
How come we haven't learned these lessons?
I don't know. I mean,
some people in my department actually are theorize that it's because World War II is exiting living memory.
And I've heard a lot of people suggest that. And I think especially, well, one scary thing about the United States is that we don't really have a very clear, collectively don't have a very clear idea of what fascism is and is like, and the way that Germany does. So I think like Germans on the whole are much more aware of what fascism is and why, and the very good reasons to not want it. So whereas in the United States, there's this attitude among, especially among younger people, as you say, who don't remember World War II, that like, let's just give it a try.
Yeah, especially because young people who don't know World War II are people under the age of 90.
Yes, well, right, which is like everyone. Yeah, exactly.
But classical liberals have taught me that fascism is only fascism if they are literally wearing the robe and declare themselves capital F fascists.
You have to actually be goose-stepping around and Sieg-heiling. And even a person who does that, the classical liberal will assure you that they're probably being ironic.
I like this stuff, but like 10 times a day, the British bearded face crosses my Twitter feed in some sort of meme or other.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's you've talked to a lot of like far right YouTubers, and that's one that you've never touched. Is that like a third rail thing?
Oh wait, which one?
Carl.
Oh, I have talked to him.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, he went on the Thinkery podcast.
Oh God, what was that like?
It was, it's fine. I don't know. We went back and forth for like half an hour with Carl going on about like how, the black family is deranged and what they need is Christianity, and that's his hypothesis about racism and poverty in America, is that black people just need to stop feeling sorry for themselves and to get married. So I was arguing against this position, and
also like, wait, black people need to be more Christian. Like, have you met black people?
Yeah, it's
Jesus, very popular in the African American community.
He really is, yeah. So Carl, well, yeah, I've talked to him. What I haven't really done is debate alt-right people. So I've been invited to on several occasions now and have always declined, which I have mixed feelings about, because a lot of what has led me to decline, I'm personally not opposed to it. I'm kind of curious, but I know a lot of my base of supporters would really be against it.
There's the elusive Blair White interview that you've been trying to do forever.
So I did that. I did one debate with Blair White, back in March or something, and then I'm probably, assuming she doesn't back out of it, as she occasionally is known to do, we will debate again on next weekend.
Is there a subject, or is it just going to be a general...
On children transitioning will be the subject.
That's a good one. That's actually that's one I would like to hear a lot of conversation about, because I don't think I know enough.
Yeah, so
you have to be like in that, like, I don't understand gender dysphoria enough to like get what it's like.
So this is a subject that I'm learning more about. I didn't used to have much of an opinion on it, but Blair's opinion is that childhood transitioning is child abuse, which is a very extreme and indefensible position. That, you know, and I feel like at this point, like I'm much more experienced debating than I was when I first talked to her, and I sort of know how these things work. A lot of people on the left don't debate. I'm like one of the only ones who does it on YouTube. And a lot of people kind of give me shit for it. I think I'm naive or stupid or at least misguided. Well, I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm aware of the fact that these conversations are often had in bad faith. Like, I know. Like, I'm aware of the fact that people are going to say mean things about me in the comments. Of course they are. Like, that's what they do. What do you think this is? The university? Like, so I know how it goes. But at this point, I just kind of don't care anymore. Like, I just seen it all, and like I know how it goes, and I'm not even nervous about it anymore at this point. Like I know,
like everything that they try to destroy your life has probably already happened by this point.
Well, right, exactly, exactly. I just that's basically where I'm at. Yeah.
I did have one. Somebody did ask, did you have anything to say about the golden son of Europe's response? Apparently.
Well, I mean, I thought the response was largely a non sequitur to what I had said. I mean, I'm very touched that the Sweet Prince has said that he likes me and has called me a demon out of Slaanesh. I love Slaanesh and an enemy of the Imperium and all that. That's all great. But then he goes on for a long rant about why the porn industry is bad, which is something that I've never even talked about, and is a non sequitur to anything I discussed in my video. So I feel that it's not really to the point. And obviously, you know, all jokes aside, I mean, the guy's a fascist. Like, I don't actually want to be his friend, alas. Oh, if I could be though, if he were just simply blue pilled. God, the day the golden one joins the left will be the greatest day of my life.
Today, you're going to talk about, he pulls out his teddy bear, I'm going to talk about the means of production.
I mean, I would just, if he did that, I would just quit YouTube. I would be irrelevant because the best
YouTube's done, I won.
Right, exactly. Well, or the golden one won. Yeah, he would replace me.
His channel is one that I occasionally have to show people in bars because they refuse to believe he exists.
Oh, yeah. If I had a pint for every time I have whipped out the golden one in bars.
Because like I'm like, no, he's a Swedish bodybuilder, a fierce Swedish nationalist, but lives in Ireland.
Let me show you
his teddy bear, reads fantasy, cosplays as like a Roman legionnaire, and plays Skyrim, where he beats up the Frankfurt school. And it's like, this guy can't be real. I'm like, he is everything and more. He is a human character.
Yeah, it's like I basically just can't get drunk these days without bringing him up.
Well, how can he exist? How does that exist?
It's like it's a character greater than any character I can create.
Oh man, yeah,
I'm jealous of God. I'm jealous.
Man, now I want leftist golden one.
Yeah,
how can we do this?
We need leftist golden one. A bodybuilding champion. Let's find one. Let's make one.
You know what? It would not be hard to find a Swedish socialist. So we just need to start hitting up the Swedish gyms and find.
Exactly. We just need to get him. Yeah, get a Swedish socialist into the Temple of Iron, and a lot of like maybe Clockwork Orange style viewing of fantasy films until that becomes just internalized way of thinking. Yeah.
I think leftist golden one is a sci-fi reader.
He is a sci-fi reader. That's probably true. Well, because it's interesting because there's a sense, right? There is a sense in which like there's something inherently conservative about fantasy, or about this, because it sort of is. I mean, not inherently conservative. I don't want to say, because I know a lot of people who are on the left, and also they love like the Renaissance fair, and they love all that kind of swords and all that stuff. But I do think that the fantasy universe is kind of at least adjacent to the fascist view of Western civilization, right? And so there's a reason why fascists are attracted to high fantasy stuff. And you know, in sci-fi, of course, there's a long tradition of sort of utopian thought about the progressive future that overcomes the past. And so it's sort of natural that progressives will be attracted to sci-fi for that reason. Yeah, so that does make sense.
I've thought a lot about how all science fiction post the 60s is about Star Trek and how we're either not living up to it or how it's wrong.
Mhm.
And it's like
Yeah,
that's just me being the biggest dork
being a
on the
Trekkie.
planet. Being a Trekkie, but also you were talking about fantasy. I'm like a Trekkie D&D player, and like all the
Yeah.
like I am all of the things that I would have been persona non grata like 30 years ago. I'm very lucky I was born in the late 80s.
Yeah. Well, because now is the time of your people.
Yes. Unfortunately, my people turned out to be kind of terrible in some
Some of them,
cases.
yeah. That was that a I mean, that was kind of a strange disappointment, I think, for a lot of us, right? Because like nerds were supposed to be the underdog that would like stick up to the bullies, and then seeing that kind of group of people become the bullies was a kind of tragic. I mean, and people have like done a lot of commentary on this, right? Like the how you can actually kind of see this coming if you think about it, like that even the 80s idea of the Revenge of the Nerds, like Revenge of the Nerds movie, right? Like with these kind of like really rapey guys, or uh, so, was it John McIntosh who just did that video on um, the adorkable
Yeah.
misogyny of the Big Bang Theory?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. It was really good.
yeah, there's like this kind of strain of misogyny there that has really become prominent.
The kind of toxic mentality that came from spending so much time in all male spaces.
Yeah, toxic nerd masculinity.
It's there. It's huge.
Yeah, it's definitely a
If
thing.
anything, it's probably more toxic than like whatever like jock masculinity
Jock
was.
masculinity. Well, I don't know if I would say it's worse. I mean, jock masculinity gave us the phrase locker room talk, which we, in an American election, got this sinister meaning.
You are
But
right. Man, can we talk more about leftist golden one? I just want to imagine this
I
creature.
know, who is he? We need him, the silver one or whatever. I don't know. The
When you're talking about the
if you're
fantasy
out
element
there,
too,
please
about
join us. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yes, please. So the fantasy element. So like as we talked like a while ago at the beginning of this conversation about romanticism and romantic.
Yes.
Like I was talking about like capital R romantic, like early 19th century romanticist writers,
Uh-huh.
and how they kind of inspired fascism because like they're like the idea behind like the spirit of the nation and like we need to go back to the way that things were. And they were also the people who were like, you shouldn't raise your kids, like you should just let them do whatever they want. Like it was like this very much like everything was better when left in its natural state.
Kind of
And
primitivist. Yeah.
yeah, there's like a subtle primitive thing behind it. Like it's kind of like why I think that there's something super conservative about like paleo diets because it's like things
Yeah.
were better when we were just killing tigers, saber-toothed cats, and like
Well,
eating.
it's like a lapsarian narrative, a fall from grace kind of story, right? About it's a lost Eden.
Mhm.
That the paleo diet, right, imitate the pre-civilization life.
Yeah, there was even like
Although
a
that's usually going back further than fascists are interested in
yeah.
going.
Oh yeah, I just like I think that there's like romanticists were the people who wrote about like the first writings about like the evils of technology
Yeah,
and like Frankenstein is considered one of the like
yeah,
quintessential romantic
romantic,
novels.
yeah. And that is
Um,
certainly about science going too far and
mhm.
Prometheus and all this. Yeah. Well, although it's interesting because like there's definitely the left version of this, which is just like hippies. Because in a sense, when I think people contemporary readers read like Emerson and Thoreau, we think like these goddamn hippies, like living naked in the woods. But interestingly, the fascists are, it's not just a hippie idea. Like the fascists are, I can easily imagine fascists living naked in the woods for a while. Or the
Yeah,
gold,
and
yeah,
it's interesting because they have to like because like there's this weird dichotomy that if we like lived in a world with just fascists and like kind of like Soviet communists, like I imagine that if there was a world like that, a horrific world like that, that
yeah,
the fascists would be the ones who are the eco warriors, They would be the ones we need to
Yeah.
preserve the environment, while the communists would be like, we need to like super industrialize and like
Yeah.
it's about advancement. And, this is
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. Well, because I mean, Richard Spencer even was saying this in interviews. Like he was talking about, he said this in his very softball interview with Roaming Millennial, where he talks about how he cringes at the Republican Party's triumphant driving SUVs and not giving a shit about the environment. That he's a big environmentalist, and he tries to present himself as a kind of a granola urban white guy, like.
Yeah, there's even this is an amazing discovery of like how some people. There's a Vice article about the paleo people, about paleo diet people, and apparently there's extreme paleo people, and these are typically found in like the Silicon Valley types.
So
like
I can see that, yeah.
The libertarian Silicon Valley, and these people are straight up carnivores.
Oh God.
And they flat out do not eat plant matter because they think that
humans are carnivorous in the Neolithic era.
There's more to it though, because they said they like compare it to things like they compare like eating plants to like the agricultural revolution, and like that is somehow linked to like fiat currency, and these people are like super into Bitcoin and stuff.
I can imagine this person so easily.
And it's just like this like weird, like these are these people, and I'm like, who's this person who like for political reasons eats just meat?
Yeah. Oh, I believe it. Hang on, can we take a 2-minute break? I need to pee.
Sure.
I'm on spironolactone, this testosterone blocker, which is a diuretic. All of you trans people out there will understand. I'll be right back.
No worries. I'll hit up the chat. So chat, I will answer any questions while she is busy. The silver one, that would be. Oh no, the lag. The lag. Oh no. The gladiators during Rome were vegetarians. Yes, that is a little bit of a commentary on how rare meat used to be before the factory farm. But yeah, it's meat used to be a super luxury. That's something that we completely lost touch on. All right, thoughts on the future of North Korea? Well, North Korea, or on Korea. Well, I like Korea. I think it's a cool country. It's got some cool stuff going on there. But yeah, so I think that I don't know how the North Korea thing is going to settle down. And I think that's what's scary about it. I don't think anybody who knows what's going to happen in Korea is saying the right thing. But I'm hoping that nuclear holocaust is not part of that. I guess I'm not that bad. Or I guess I'm not that useful. And I also realized that we had someone talk about hard science fiction. I also realized that there is conservative science fiction, which might be an interesting thing to bring up. Do you think it's unhelpful to explain political ideas on a simple left or right spectrum? I actually think that the left to right spectrum is more useful than a lot of people give it credit for. Like, it's kind of just a random thing. But I think that there are underlying mentalities towards it. I think on some issues, like when the political spectrum is disagreeing about the status of science, that things become a little weird. But the left right, like when it talks about like what is humanity, what should humanity be like, what should the relationship of humanity and the state be like, those are pretty useful when it comes to things like whether or not a thing that is existing is actually happening, like whether or not climate change is real, because whatever, like that's where I think it starts to break down. And that's why, like, as we talked about with the like fascist environmentalism and stuff, and it's weird. It's simple, but it's a good like explainer, I guess, the thing to say. So I just got a question, and this might be one that you'd have a good thing to say on, and that is, do you think that there's fundamental issues with the left-right, like using those words?
Oh, just that dichotomy? Well, I think that any kind of like system of categorizing things that broad is going to have problems, right? I still find it useful, system. But I think it's also important to understand when we're using that it really is just these are very cloudy areas that we're kind of picking out with a term and not rigidly defined like ideologies or anything like that. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of ways in which there'll be especially particular people who maybe kind of who kind of strain our conception of what it being is to be a leftist or a rightist. But also like there'll be things that you are common to both. I mean, I think it should be assumed that I'm not a proponent of horseshoe theory like explanations, although there are certain things, many cultural things that kind of you'll find in sort of non-centrist positions. And one of those includes experimentation with like primitive diets and things. So like we were just talking about with Romanticism, like there's like you can go far left with the Romanticism or far right with the Romanticism. I know, and also in like communities of survivalists or what do they call them?
Preppers.
Preppers, exactly. There's like far left preppers and far right preppers. There's actually a Louis Theroux Weird Weekends documentary about preppers in America, and there's this weird community of them in trailer parks where he kind of interviews like the right wing and left wing people. And there's an awkward interview with this like old kind of hippie guy who's a left wing prepper, and Louis is asking him like, well, you know, like how do you deal with the fact that you are kind of surrounded by a lot of like really racist, like fascist kind of people, and you know the guy doesn't like it, but he's so committed to this fantasy of an apocalypse event that it's just what he has to do.
Oh yeah, they're a fun one to break down.
I'm noticing it's only seems to be really white people who do this. That's something I haven't really thought about in depth.
The only person of color I ever known who has anything to do with the prepper community is because she was adopted into a white family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh man. Yeah, because I lost my train of thought. Never mind. So, preppers. Yeah, it's also a very American phenomenon, it seems.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's such an American thing. Like stockpiling weapons, you know, is a pretty American thing to do to begin with. There's just this strain of like paranoia in the national consciousness. I don't know what it is, but you know, it's sometimes it takes some of prepping. Sometimes it's like home defense, right? This is another area where this comes up a lot with the gun debate. There's reasonable reasons to own a handgun. I mean, there's even a somewhat reasonable way to own handguns for self-defense. But I've talked to people and I've seen forum posts of gun users who do things like they have a, you know, semi-automatic rifle in every room of the house so that they're never more than 5 seconds away. And you ask them like, why is this really necessary? Like, why not just keep a shotgun in the closet like a normal person? And they say like, well, what if there are multiple armed home intruders who are going? It's just like, what situation are you preparing for? Like ninjas are going to break into your house? Like what? Just like, who are you that this is something that you have to deal with? Like,
yeah. Well, a lot of them also have like this, this concept that they're going to somehow go into a civil war against the U.S. Army and win.
Ah, yes. So,
and that somehow like that's going to happen.
Yeah, this idea of the small arms uprising against the U.S. government. I mean, it's just a ridiculous idea, right? Like, either you have the U.S. military on your side or you don't. That's what determines who wins in a situation where there's a you know, violent revolution in the United States.
Yeah, there's like a thing in America where like so like there's a lot of people who defend the Second Amendment and have a lot of guns because they have that like blood of tyrants, like Tree of Liberty mentality. But like because of like how big and sophisticated the U.S. military is, it's kind of rendered that entire argument kind of irrelevant. Like like you have remote controlled airplanes that launch missiles now, and you have literal nuclear weapons. Like,
well, I mean, a lot of the absurdity of these conversations comes from the fact that the Second Amendment was written at a time when warfare just looks nothing like it looks now. And so the notion of a well-regulated militia to protect ourselves from tyrannical governments, like we're in a whole different period of military history, and we need to like rethink what that means. Scutch points out, honestly, the prepper people, he says they just want a race war. Oh, well, there's definitely that element to it. Like, again, I know that to a lot of people, I'm going to sound like a stereotypical SJW saying, oh, it's always about racism, it's about racism, it's about racism. But it kind of is. Like, and by racism, I don't necessarily just mean bigotry, but just the kind of vaguer racial imagination of white people where they're trying to protect themselves from looters, right? Or they're imagining a disaster situation where there's looters and thugs, and we all know, because of, for instance, the way people talk after hurricanes and so on, that the word looter is a racially tinged word. And there's a particular situation people are imagining when they're imagining defending their homes against post-apocalyptic looters, and it involves white people shooting black people.
Yeah, I think it also plays into there's one thing that I've noticed, and that is like in Facebook, that there's like these like I'm a total badass stories they always try to play.
Yeah.
Like the stories about like the SJW professor who a veteran stands up and bravely calls them out on their stuff. Or like the thing about like how, oh yeah, I got attacked by 3 gay people on the street because they wanted to kill me for being straight, and I pulled out my like Desert Eagle and I totally like made them put the fear of God into them, and now I'm like here and I'm like, yep, yeah, you totally did that.
There's also this like a strong desire to be persecuted, or to not to actually be persecuted, of course, but to represent themselves as persecuted. Poor straight people, because we know how big a threat gay people are to straight people walking around at night. This is just a purely imaginary scenario. Why do they come up with it? Well, because it justifies. I think people get into this like these patterns of thought and behavior that are very paranoid, and so. If you're a conservative American patriot, you're trying to, how are you going to explain why you need to stockpile all these weapons? Well, what if the gays come for me? Like, these are weird post hoc explanations for the paranoid behavior. That also tend to that demonstrate just a big ignorance of like the other groups of people they're even talking about. And these are people whose idea of Muslims and of black people comes from Fox News.
Yeah, but like I love like they have these like weird like power fantasy posts that they
yes, they love those. Well, I mean, even the NRA, like if you follow the NRA on Twitter, what you see is a lot of stories about a heroic gun owner defends himself, defends his business, defends his family from thugs or whatever. That's the really just this idea, this well-rehearsed fantasy, which sometimes does happen, granted, is kind of the underlying narrative that leads to all these feelings of, defensiveness and desire to protect, often very unhinged from any kind of like rational, statistical, probabilistic thinking about what sorts of things are actually threatening or likely to happen. It's the power of the story, of the imagination, more than kind of like a rational analysis of risk.
Yeah, that's why like you end up with these weird surveys like that say that people are more afraid of getting killed by ISIS than they are of like dying in a car accident.
Right. Yeah, like, because fear is just fundamentally irrational, and it doesn't work based on statistical risk assessment. It works based on just sort of what is a psychologically prominent threat.
By the way, this is why I really like what you're doing with Contrapoints, and that is like why I keep referencing the left video. And that is like, I think that you're grasping that like this is not a fight we're going to win by just winning the logical argument. That there's more going on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me that a lot of people, well, on YouTube anyway, the people I'm arguing against much of the time, the kind of the skeptic centrists that we know so well, like I think part of the big disagreement I have with them is they think that they're really rational, and I think that they're not, and that they're bullshitting themselves. They're rationalizing and not really reasoning. And And then with the left, that I have a problem with the idea that what we, logical arguments are going to be what wins this, or on the left, people seem to think, oh, it's either logic or it's violence, right? Like we win rational arguments, or there's this opposition to propaganda on the left, right? Not that what I'm doing is propaganda, but as I think about how to do these debates, like often what matters when I do a debate, I think, is not, I don't even bother often preparing that much for a debate. I mean, here's what my preparation for a debate is these days, is to make sure that my makeup and hair look really good. And to make sure that I look at the camera and smile, because it's important, because again, this is what people don't see. People don't listen to reasons. They see a person or a personality, and there's a beauty contest. There's it's just an emotional reaction that you're causing them to have. And I know in most of my early debates, the emotional reaction people have to me is that I'm irrational, I'm accusatory, I'm all kinds of things. So for me now, it's a matter of not changing the substance of what I do, but the style of it, and in an attempt to make them feel more attracted to me, which has nothing to do with reason.
I think I didn't somebody call you the Nazi whisperer at one point?
Yeah.
I think that's obviously doing something.
Yeah, it's but it's not got to do with reason. It's got to do with simply the way that you engage with another human being.
And I mean, your stuff, your video essays became way more entertaining, and you have a lot more jokes, and you have a lot more you frame things more like scenarios. Like I really like that you've done now, I think, 2 videos that were kind of framed as a talk show.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really good way to do it.
Yeah. So with my videos, I mean, I have a different approach when I'm doing scripted videos, which is I'm making stuff that's like 50% entertainment, because that's how, to be honest, look at YouTube, look at what gets views. Like increasing how much academic rigor you have, alas, does not lead to more views. And so I find, why, people come to this website and they want to be entertained, and I'm like that too. Like I'm just as much of a attention attention deficit millennial, I demand entertainment at all seconds kind of person as everyone else. So I try to make videos that I would kind of want to watch, which means that if I've gone on for two or 3 minutes of doing like something kind of dry, it's time to interrupt that with something like ridiculous or comical or sexy, or like to keep the eyeballs on you, in other words, and with something shiny. But yeah, I also think that comedy is extremely powerful. People love you if you can make them laugh, and they'll let you get away with a lot if you can make them laugh. So that's something I work on a lot.
Yep. I mean, it's good, and the growth is reflecting it, right? So.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, is it bad that people why can't people just read and actually get informed and read news articles and seek out different information and do research and think? Well, the unfortunate reality is that we can't wait around for that to happen. And
yeah,
so,
I mean,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, continue, finish your thought.
So of course, I want people to keep doing the academic stuff. Like, God, what a terrifying world we'd be in if there was only entertainment. But also, someone has to do the entertainment side of it, because otherwise the knowledge becomes too arcane, or it becomes only accessible to people who are willing and able to devote a lot of attention to it.
Man, I wish I could. I wish I could think of how to do that. That'd be good.
Well, your videos are pretty entertaining. Like, you've been doing some vampire costumes and things.
That was fun. That was that was the result of a dollar store where I couldn't even get the plastic vampire fangs.
Oh yeah.
Because like I filmed that video on like September 20th. And so the only place that had gone far too soon for Halloween by that point was like the dollar store.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have the plastic fangs. I had to buy like those candy fangs.
Yeah. That's good.
That was fun. That I should probably do more stuff like that. And and like my whole thing is I'm like, you kind of came on to be the counterpoint, the contrapoint to what was going on, and I'm kind of trying to do it for historical literacy.
Yeah.
Which is something that
Has, well, I think
the current situation is fallen really high on.
I also don't think that everyone has to do what I do. Like when I try to describe myself, I know I maybe have a tendency to sound like a chauvinist for it, but I'm just explaining why I do things my way. I don't think by any means that everyone else should. But if you want to, yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I've talked about this before, but like one thing that was an inspiration for me was these now somewhat outdated red letter media Star Wars reviews, right? Which I frankly would never ever have imagined I would care to watch 5.5 hours of Star Wars reviews. But because they managed to make it so, like, there's a character that you're learning about as you're going through this ridiculous review, a character who's sort of a self-parody of the kind of person who would make a 5-hour Star Wars review. And it's punctuated with just, there's a lot of misogynistic jokes. Okay. But there's, it's overall a experience where you're sort of, you don't feel like you're learning, you're entertained. Like you don't have to sit and be like, okay, time to sit down and focus and like really pay attention to this now. Like, no, it invites you in and just keeps pulling you along. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. You know how I can tell that you and I grew up in very similar, like, we're like almost exactly the same age, and like got into the same stuff around the same time. Because like is because I was also mesmerized by all of those.
The Plinkett reviews, yeah. And when they came out, they were like nothing else on YouTube.
Yeah, and now there's definitely like an influence that showed up in a lot of things. What do you think about like now? I'm starting to see a few videos where there's obvious Contrapoints influence, like on all of like Ollie's videos, basically.
Oh yeah. That's been fun to see other people, my videos having an effect on other YouTubers.
It seems like one thing that really stuck was your separating it into parts and then saying it in strange languages.
Yes, I mean, even that is a little bit evocative of Plinkett, right? Part 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess the languages was my contribution.
I think that the characters, that might be something to work on, even though I'm not really the best actor, but
I haven't really seen anyone else pick up the character-driven way of doing it. That, I guess, is maybe my most original contribution to this kind of video essay. My plan, by the way, for these characters, the next thing I want to do with them is I would like to add. So the first video I ever did with characters was this like punching Nazis video, right? Where I had 2 characters that were very like they were bland characters that just kind of shouted at each other, and you didn't really have a sense of who they were. I kind of have been improving on this steadily. With now I have sort of 2-dimensional characters, I would say, who are characters who are sort of archetypes or kind of like they're icons for an ideology or something, like Abigail Cockbain being the kind of representative of all TERFs, or Fritz being the representative of the alt-right, or Tabby being the representative of like the kind of like furry leftists, Marxist revolutionaries that inhabit my Twitter mentions so often. And I guess what I would like to do is add a kind of like, it's to like make it more artful by adding a 3rd dimension still. What does Abigail Cockbain dream about? Like, what does Tabby really want and desire? Like, what are her relations? What's her relationship with her family? Like, these are questions I would like to explore.
3 years from now, you're just going to be publishing short films. They're just going to be like these dramas.
Yeah, that might be the direction we're headed. Who knows?
Culminates with the Contrapoints movie, which will come into select theaters.
Yeah, that might be where we're headed.
It's like it's going to be your version of like Dr. Dolittle, or like
Yeah.
because it's, you know, you're playing every single role.
Yes, yes. At some point, I wonder if that becomes too much of a limitation. And yet, I also have trouble imagining getting other actors involved very much at this point.
Well, I think that it kind of fits because in like some of it, like in the video about punching Nazis, you did say that you have you don't have right wing, like you don't have right wing beliefs, but you have right wing thoughts. And like
Yeah.
it's like I always thought that like that you making all the characters you is like, you know, first of all, we're all working on shoestring budgets, but also because it's like a lot of these are you debating yourself, or
Yeah.
you going through your own thoughts in conversation formats.
So
Except
I
with
had a,
Fritz, not Fritz. I'm not going to call you a Nazi, but
yeah. So I have to say that since that I made that punching Nazis video, my sense that I have fascist thoughts has much reduced. I don't. I
okay.
feel that I feel like in some ways I've become like more full-heartedly a leftist, like, and that I don't have these like. It's just not as all that common these days that I think like fucking political correctness. Like I definitely used to think that more often than I do now. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe I should like I need to acquaint myself with that feeling so that I can try to understand other people better. But I will say that when I'm writing a dialogue video, especially when I'm writing a video like the one about TERFs, where you have a TERF character and a trans character, or um, the one I did about the left with Tabby and the more centrist character, like writing, I was like, oh, I see why Plato did this, because as I'm writing arguments for someone besides me, I think of ideas and arguments that I never would have thought of if I was only writing in my own voice. And so it's an interesting way to kind of discover things, is just by to try imaginatively to write a kind of, because you don't want to just write caricature stuff, right? Because you could easily just caricature other people's arguments. Whereas when I'm trying to write their point of view, I try to imagine, okay, what does it really feel like to think and believe these things? And how would you justify all this kind of stuff to yourself if you believed that? And I try to subjectively enter into the space of someone who's like a TERF or an alt-right person, not because I actually have any sympathy with it, I don't, but just in order to kind of like present them in a way that's like, it's going to be recognizable as a real human almost, right? Instead of just as like a straw man set up to be burned down.
That's good. That's exactly what the like rational skeptic trademark people were doing, and that was what
Yeah.
was like so frustrating, because they do that and then get 700,000 subscribers, and then that would be the popular concept as to what somebody who was doing that was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like poison to the point, like with my sister. My sister is like be turned into like this like reactionary person, and I'm like,
yeah,
uses that word like the social justice warrior thing unironically, and I was like, how did we get here?
yeah. Well, I mean, does she watch YouTube? Like,
She does. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like it's, I try to be somewhat cordial with the anti-SJWs, but really the point where I really resent them most is that they actually have had some influence on society. And, I do sometimes, you see a group of high school students and they're they're repeating these talking points, and you're just like, wow, like you guys have actually successfully made my life worse and harder by turning people against us and by spreading misinformation.
Yeah, that was one of the things that happened that I learned at VidCon, is like it really hit me like, oh wow, these people are doing actual human damage
Yeah.
to real people.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I knew that intellectually, but like when I actually like started talking to the people who have been like swarmed by this stuff, it's just, oh man.
Are you thinking of Anita Sarkeesian? And
not only her, the fact that she's like a complete sweetheart in person was pretty nice too.
Yeah.
But also some other people who had like I had somebody who had Sargon basically ruin one of her gigs like as a job. And that was
God.
like a huge thing.
Yeah. I mean, and so this is like this kind of stuff. I mean, I hear about this stuff all the time. This is also one reason why it becomes an obstacle to my debating these people, because, a lot of people when it comes to Sargon, it's not just that that they disagree with him or they think that his ideas are dangerous or something. That's the reason why they don't want me to debate him. It gets much more personal than that. You know, there's people who's like, they feel that they've been dogpiled or had, like you said, like jobs lost or like just had really bad things happen to them as a result of like anti-SJW YouTube activity. And so with that, you know, I understand why seeing me getting friendly with those people, you know, feels like betrayal or is painful to see. But on the other hand, like, I feel like if I don't do it, then like, or if no one does it, then, you know, how do we get ourselves out of this situation?
Yeah, okay, I'm going to try to get near the end of, we go in for 2 hours, but I do have one more burning question, and then I'd love to like see what if you have any questions. So then that kind of discussion leads to, well, what were your thoughts on the whole Laci Green debacle that's been going on?
Well, I mean, I'm somewhat hesitant to talk about this because I just know personally so many of the people involved in this. But I mean, Laci, like, I've talked to her about this. I think, unlike most people, that she genuinely thought that she was doing the right thing. I know a lot of people think that she's just doing this for money. Well, I don't think, I mean, talking to her one-on-one, I never got the impression that that was the case. And the lack of videos she's produced in the last couple months seems to me, anyway, to belie the idea that this is all a bit for money. However, I also think that I strongly disagree with the approach she's taken. And I think she's just very wrong about a lot of stuff relating to trans issues, for one thing, and a lot of stuff related to like the alt-right, and she's misjudged the current political situation online, and I think that she's spread a lot of misinformation. And so again, I don't think she's like, I don't view her as like a manipulative person who's like all in it for the money at all. But I also just disagree with what she's doing. I mean, and I would tell her that I disagree with it. I'm sure she knows that I disagree with it.
All right. Yeah, I remember back. I'm sure you do too. Back when she was internet atheist, go green 18.
Yeah, I remember.
So I guess before we wrap up, do you have anything that you feel like we dodged around or danced around that you want to know about? Or want to bounce around?
I think we can probably wrap it up. I have some other work to get doing tonight. But this, I think it was a good conversation. 2 hours is a good solid chunk of time.
We went to a lot of places. We had a lot of fun. Yeah. We invented leftist golden ones, so we did.
Oh yeah, that's important discovery. Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought. No, I'm not gonna go. No more Pats. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And this is, and of course, everybody out there, thank you for being a subscriber to Step Back. If you're not a subscriber to Step Back, I do these every month, and I try to grab anybody that is, friends of mine and people I know who are making cool stuff and chat them up. That's the point of the series. I stole it literally from Little Caesars, so it's literally Customer Appreciation Day. So I just give you guys what you want, access to cool people and cool stuff. So have a good one, and see y'all next time.
Bye, everyone.